Daniel Kerr never imagined that one routine drive home would turn into a fight for his life as a mysterious predator disguised as a police officer set a deadly trap. He couldn't escape. Officer Daniel Kerr spent most of his career believing that routine moments were the safest parts of his shift. He trusted the quiet roads he drove every night and rarely imagined danger hiding in plain sight. On the night everything changed, he left the station in his unmarked sedan, planning nothing more than a quiet ride home. The city lights faded behind him as he entered the wide industrial district, a place filled with empty warehouses and long stretches of road. The area was silent except for the steady hum of his engine. Nothing seemed unusual, and Daniel relaxed as he drove deeper into the emptiness. Then a pair of headlights appeared far behind him. At first, Daniel ignored them, assuming it was just another driver heading home late. But the lights grew brighter with surprising speed. The vehicle closed the distance quickly, almost as if it were matching his every move. Daniel checked his mirrors again, and felt a strange sense of unease. The road was too deserted for such sudden activity. He eased his foot off the gas, giving the other vehicle room to pass. Instead, red and blue lights flashed to life, washing over the dark road in sharp bursts. Daniel stared, confused. He knew exactly which units were assigned to this district, and none of them were nearby. He slowed the car and pulled to the side out of instinct and training. As he came to a stop, he noticed details that didn't fit. The light bar looked slightly crooked. The vehicle's paint was uneven. Even the small badge emblem on the front grille seemed off-center. These small imperfections made Daniel tense. Something felt wrong, and his instincts sharpened. The air outside the car seemed heavier, as if the night itself had shifted. A figure stepped out of the so-called police vehicle. The person moved with confidence, wearing dark clothing and what looked like a badge, but the badge shape was unfamiliar. The stranger approached Daniel's car without hesitation. Daniel's pulse increased. He recognized that this was not standard procedure, not even close. This wasn't a routine stop. It was a trap crafted to look official, something designed to make someone like him drop his guard. In that moment, as the figure drew closer and the false lights continued to flash, Daniel understood he had become the target. The quiet road, the unusual pursuit, the fake patrol car, everything pointed to one chilling truth. Someone had planned this encounter long before he saw those headlights. By the next morning, Daniel's car was discovered abandoned near an old warehouse, its engine still warm, as if he had left in a hurry. The doors were unlocked, keys sitting on the seat, but there was no sign of him. Investigators arrived quickly, puzzled by the scene. There were scuff marks on the pavement near the driver's side, and small pieces of debris suggested a struggle had taken place. The warehouse itself showed no signs of forced entry, and no footprints led inside, leaving detectives with more questions than answers. Daniel, a veteran officer trained to handle danger, had vanished without a trace. Neighbors in the industrial district reported nothing unusual the night before, claiming they had not heard any argument or disturbance. Surveillance cameras on nearby streets had recorded only a faint shadow moving across the warehouse lot. The image was blurry and unidentifiable, but it was enough to convince the team that someone had been watching, someone careful, experienced, and determined. There was no evidence of a getaway vehicle, and yet Daniel's disappearance was clearly deliberate. At the police station, colleagues reviewed his last known movements. He had left the station around the same time every day for years, taking the same route home. Nothing about that night deviated from the pattern he had followed for months. There were no threats in his recent reports, no conflicts in his personal life, and no suspicious activity that could have suggested someone wanted him gone. The realization set in slowly. This was not a random crime. Whoever took him had planned it meticulously, knowing exactly when and where to strike. Hours turned into a full day, and investigators began combing every inch of the surrounding area. They checked alleyways, storage yards, and abandoned buildings, but nothing turned up. It was as though Daniel had simply disappeared into thin air. The warehouse showed no evidence of occupancy, no hidden rooms, nothing to indicate that he had been taken inside. Each lead seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. As news of the incident spread through the department, tension mounted. Officers who had worked alongside Daniel were shocked and fearful. The disappearance of a fellow officer in such mysterious circumstances suggested a bold and dangerous mind at work. The situation grew even more disturbing when investigators started to notice small inconsistencies in the initial reports of the fake patrol car. Its presence, its movement, even the way it matched Daniel's route all pointed to a predator who understood the habits of those who were trained to enforce the law. The case had shifted from a simple missing person investigation to something far more sinister, a hunt with unknown stakes and an enemy who remained invisible in the shadows. Detectives working on Daniel's disappearance began digging deeper into past cases, trying to find patterns that could explain what had happened. At first, nothing seemed to connect. But as they examined old reports of missing persons and unusual traffic incidents, a chilling link emerged. Over the past year, at least 3 other individuals had vanished under similar circumstances. Each had been stopped on isolated roads by someone posing as a police officer. None had ever been found. At first, investigators thought these were separate crimes, mere coincidences of timing and location, but the similarities were too precise to ignore. A clear pattern began to form. All the victims shared one trait. They were former law enforcement officers, military veterans, or individuals trained to recognize threats. Each disappearance had occurred in industrial districts late at night, areas that were quiet, isolated, and easy to control. The fake police cars had similar markings, each slightly off from official design, as if the perpetrator had studied real vehicles carefully before crafting their own. The methods were deliberate, calculated, and chillingly consistent. Whoever was behind this understood authority and how to manipulate it, using uniforms and lights to disarm those who were trained to spot danger. Investigators scoured abandoned warehouses, side roads, and surveillance footage along the routes where the previous victims had last been seen. Each clue suggested the perpetrator had been monitoring potential targets for weeks, even months, before taking action. There was no sign of panic during the attacks, no struggle captured on cameras, only carefully orchestrated disappearances. The case became more than a missing person investigation. It transformed into a hunt for a predator who studied his victims like prey, exploiting their routines and instincts. For the detectives, this revelation changed everything. They could no longer rely on the assumption that the perpetrator was inexperienced. This was someone who knew the risks and could anticipate reactions. The strategy behind the crimes suggested intelligence, patience, and obsession. Every clue hinted at a mind that had been operating in the shadows, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. The thought that Daniel, a skilled officer, had fallen into this trap added urgency and fear to the investigation. As the team pieced together the pattern, they realized the industrial district itself was more than just a backdrop. It was a hunting ground, chosen for isolation and control. The previous victims, like Daniel, had all unknowingly driven into a carefully planned snare. Flashlights illuminated the steps as investigators descended cautiously, every creak of the wooden boards heightening their sense of danger. At the bottom, they found a reinforced room, carefully hidden from the outside world. Inside there were maps of the district, diagrams of roads, and stacks of old traffic reports. Uniforms with minor differences from official designs were folded neatly on shelves, and a variety of vehicle parts that could assemble a convincing fake patrol car were scattered across tables. On the walls were photographs of Daniel and the other missing victims, pinned in a meticulous arrangement that suggested the perpetrator had been studying them for months. The discovery stunned the team. Every detail in the room showed careful planning and methodical obsession. It was clear that the perpetrator had been targeting specific individuals, focusing on those who had experience in law enforcement or the military. Each item in the room reinforced the idea that the attacks were calculated with precision, intended to control and manipulate the victims before vanishing without a trace. The photos suggested the perpetrator had been observing Daniel long before the night of his disappearance, understanding his habits and routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Evidence from the underground room indicated a level of sophistication that terrified the detectives. The suspect had a strategy for almost every scenario, from the fake patrol vehicles to the hidden pathways that led victims away from public view. Daniel's current location remained unknown, and the suspect was still at large. The discovery confirmed that the case was far from over and that the perpetrator had not yet made a mistake. The detectives now knew the enemy was methodical, ruthless, and capable of operating undetected. The trap had been revealed, but the prey was still missing, leaving everyone to wonder whether Daniel had survived, or if the next disappearance was inevitable. Investigators tracked tire marks from the abandoned warehouse into a remote stretch of forest, following a trail that led them deeper into isolation. The path was overgrown, with fallen branches and uneven ground, slowing their progress. Its deliberate positioning suggested that Daniel had survived long enough to leave a message, a silent declaration that he had fought back. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath as search teams pushed farther along the trail. Signs of a struggle appeared on the muddy ground, scuffed earth, broken twigs, and deep footprints leading toward the riverbank. The bloodhounds tracked the scent until it abruptly disappeared near the water. It appeared the suspect had chosen the river as an escape route, possibly diving into the currents to avoid capture. No body was recovered, and no trace of the suspect was found, leaving the final confrontation frustratingly incomplete. Despite the lack of closure, evidence from the underground room and the forest confirmed that Daniel had confronted the predator. Items found along the trail indicated a violent encounter, and the carefully placed badge suggested he had resisted, possibly forcing the suspect to flee in haste. Investigators concluded that Daniel's courage and quick thinking may have prevented further disappearances, even though the cost was his continued absence. The forest became a silent witness to the deadly encounter, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows for those who seemed untouchable. In the weeks that followed, the case remained officially open, but leads grew cold. Investigators analyzed patterns, revisited old warehouses, and cross-checked reports of suspicious vehicles, but the suspect's identity remained elusive. Daniel's disappearance became a cautionary tale within the department, a warning that even trained officers could be vulnerable to a carefully planned trap. Though Daniel's fate was never fully confirmed, the evidence left behind told a story of survival against overwhelming odds. The predator, once methodical and invisible, had been forced to retreat, ending his string of attacks for now. The case left more questions than answers, and the forest where the final confrontation had taken place held its secrets tightly, as if guarding the truth for those brave enough to search.